Marcus caught her arm before she made it to the lobby door. He yanked her back hard. You walk out that door and you are finished. Get off me, she said. Adaeze pulled free and ran. She hit the morning air at full speed, the cold rushing into her lungs, her heels loud against the wet concrete. She did not look back. She did not have a plan. She only had forward. A black car was crawling alongside her before she noticed it. The rear door opened and a man stepped out directly in front of her. She stopped so sharply she nearly stumbled. He was tall, unhurried, dressed in a dark suit that had no wrinkles anywhere on it. His eyes found the bruise along her jaw immediately and did not move from it. Who did that to your face? He asked. His voice was quiet. Completely quiet. Adaeze opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her chest was still heaving. She was standing on a public street at 7 in the morning, in front of her employer, looking precisely like what she was, a woman who had been struck and had run toward the one place she could think of because it was the only direction that made sense. Minjae waited. He did not reach toward her. He did not glance around to see who was watching. He did not lower his voice or adjust his posture to seem less imposing. He did none of the things people did when they wanted the appearance of concern without the actual weight of it. He stood with his eyes on her face and let the question occupy all the space between them. She did not get to answer. Adaeze. Marcus's voice came from behind her. Close. Too close. She felt the shift in the air before the footstep confirmed it. Her whole body cinched inward from the ground up, the automatic, long-practiced preparation of someone whose body had learned to brace before impact arrived. Marcus stopped a few feet back. He looked at Minjae with the calm and slightly impatient expression of a man who had never once found anything in his path that he could not eventually remove. He assessed the suit, the car, the driver who had not moved from behind the wheel. He completed his internal calculation and arrived at a conclusion. She is my partner, Marcus said, his voice easy, almost warm. We had an argument this morning. It is personal. I am sure you understand. He glanced at Adaeze, a glance that contained an entire vocabulary she already knew every word of, and then back at Minjae. If you could give us a minute. Minjae turned toward Marcus. Slowly. The way a man turns when he has decided to give something his complete and undivided attention. He looked at Marcus's face. Then his hands. Then his face again. No, Minjae said. Marcus's chin came forward slightly. I beg your pardon. She works for me, Minjae said. She is already late. Her face was not like that yesterday. Marcus laughed, short, dry, the laugh of a man who has concluded that the person across from him has fundamentally misread the situation. I do not know who you think you are, but this is none of your business. I know who you are, Minjae said. The laugh stopped. Minjae took a single step forward. One step. His hands went into his coat pockets. His expression did not change by a fraction. He looked at Marcus with the particular stillness of a man who had spent his entire professional life making things understood without ever needing to raise his voice. If you put your hands on her again, Minjae said, you will lose them. The man sweeping the entrance to the pharmacy had gone still. The woman loading her car across the street had stopped moving. A cyclist had slowed without apparently meaning to. Marcus stood completely motionless. Something shifted behind his eyes. His confidence was very loud. It had been loud his entire life. But underneath it, something older and more accurate sent a message upward that his confidence could not entirely silence. The message said, this man is not speaking in hypotheticals. He is not saying the thing people say in confrontations that dissolves the moment one party walks away. He is describing, plainly and precisely, what will actually happen. Marcus looked at Adaeze one final time. She was looking at a point somewhere past Minjae's shoulder, at the building entrance, at nothing in particular. At anything that was not him. Marcus smoothed the front of his jacket with both hands. One step back. Then a second. He turned and walked away at a steady pace and did not look back, and the sound of his footsteps faded into the general noise of the morning until there was nothing left of him at all. Adaeze stood on the pavement and breathed. Minjae turned back to her. He looked at her jaw once, briefly, then at her eyes. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she said. Steadier than she had any right to be. "Get in the car," he said. "I will take you up." Before we continue with this story, I want to take a moment to welcome you to the channel. This is the Afro-Korean Mafia series. To everyone who has been here from the beginning, welcome back. And to everyone watching for the first time, I am glad you found your way here. Please like, subscribe, and become part of this community we are building together. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching from, because this story has barely begun. The inside of the car was the quietest place Adaeze had been in a very long time. Dark interior, tinted glass. The noise of Seoul outside the windows became something muffled and irrelevant the instant the door closed. Minjae sat on his side of the seat with a deliberate space between them and looked out his window at the city passing. Adaeze sat with her bag across her lap and both hands resting on top of it. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of her jaw and the pain answered immediately and she lowered her hand. "Right side panel," Minjae said, without turning from his window. "There is a first aid kit." She found it, small, dark green, exactly where he said. She cracked the ice pack inside and pressed it to her jaw and exhaled slowly through her nose. From the corner of her eye she caught him glance toward her, just once. Then he looked back out his window. The building came into view. The driver turned around to the private entrance on the side. Minjae stepped out and held the door. There was no performance in it. No deliberate display of courtesy. Simply the practical action of a man whose hand was already on the door as she was coming through it. She stepped onto the forecourt with the ice pack pressed to her jaw and her bag back on her shoulder. "Thank you," she said. "For what happened back there?" He looked at her with the directness she was already beginning to recognize as simply how he looked at things. "Does he know where you live?" "Yes," she said. He nodded once and moved toward the entrance. In the elevator, they stood beside each other without speaking. Adaeze watched the floor numbers climb and was aware of him next to her. The steadiness of him. The way his breathing carried no undercurrent, no tension wound tightly beneath the surface. She noticed it the way you notice the absence of a noise that has been running so constantly in the background that you had forgotten it was a noise at all. The elevator opened at floor 15. Yuna was in the hallway. Pink pajamas with little bears across them, hair pushed flat on one side from sleeping. Both arms already out toward Adaeze before the elevator had finished opening. Her whole small body tilted forward with the barely contained urgency of a child who had been waiting since the moment her eyes opened. Adaeze stepped out and bent down, and the small body collided with her with the complete, committed force of someone who had been waiting and was entirely done waiting. She pressed her face into Yuna's hair and held on, and the child smelled of sleep and the chamomile shampoo they used and something beneath both of those things that was entirely and specifically her own. "You are late," Yuna said into Adaze's shoulder. "I know, my love. I am sorry." Yuna leaned back and studied Adaze's face with the frank and completely unfiltered attention that small children have not yet learned to conceal. Her eyes moved to the bruise along the jaw. Her brow pulled together in a way that looked too serious for her face. "You have a hurt," she said. "I bumped it," Adaeze said. "I am fine." Yuna held the look for another beat, measuring, unconvinced, then turned to her father standing just behind Adaeze. "Appa," she said, with the grave weight of someone submitting a formal report. "Z has a hurt on her face." "I see it," Minjae said, looking at his daughter. Something happened in his face that nothing else in his life appeared to produce. Something open. Unguarded. Soft in a way it was not soft anywhere else. "Go and get dressed. Mrs. Cho has made breakfast." Yuna considered this, then seized Adaze's hand. "Come with me." "Let Z put her bag down first," Minjae said. Yuna released the hand with a sigh of deep, theatrical suffering and disappeared down the hallway. Adaeze went to the staff room beside the kitchen, set her bag down, and stood in front of the small mirror. The bruising had deepened overnight. Dark at the center, purpling toward the edge. She applied arnica from her own bag, covered what she could, held her own reflection for 3 seconds, and walked back out. Minjae was at the coffee machine. He set a cup on the counter near her side of the kitchen without a word, then turned and looked at her with the same complete attention he had given her on the pavement. "Starting tomorrow," he said, "Kwon-soo will collect you at 7. "That is really not necessary, 7, he said, in the same tone, without elaboration. She looked at his face and understood that the conversation had ended on his side before it had begun on hers. "Okay," she said. He picked up his own cup and moved toward his study. At the doorway, he paused without turning. "The ice pack," he said. 20 minutes tonight." The door closed. Adaeze stood in the kitchen with her coffee in both hands and looked at the closed door and felt something settle in her chest that she was not ready to examine yet. Yuna reappeared in a yellow dress, hair in 2 uneven bunches, holding up a hairbrush with the serenity of someone who has never been refused. "Fix it," she requested. Adaeze set her cup down. "Come here," she said. That night, Minjae woke at 3 in the morning. He lay in the dark and let the feeling of the dream pass through him the way water passes through a cupped hand, present for a moment, then gone, leaving only warmth behind. He did not pursue it. He never did. There was nothing concrete enough to follow. No specific place. No clear face. Only the feeling of someone beside him, a weight against his arm, a voice he recognized at a level beneath thought, the kind of recognition that needs no reason. He got up. He stood at the kitchen window with a glass of water and looked at the city below, the Han River in the distance, the towers on the far bank, soul moving at its permanent low frequency in the dark. After a while he went back to bed. He did not follow the thread. He had learned across 3 years of the same dream that the thread led to a door that did not open. The campaign to treat Adaeze's bruise was launched the following morning at the low table in the living room. Yuna produced a sequence of drawings with dedicated focus. A sun with a large smiling mouth. A tree with fruit that did not exist in nature but was very colorful. A figure with braids and small earrings identified as Adaeze, with a star and the word good written beside her. A second figure, same height, enormous hair, identified as Yuna, with a star that was marginally larger. "This one is so you feel better," Yuna said, placing the sun drawing in front of Adaeze with the gravity of a physician delivering a course of treatment. "This one is because trees are nice," she added, placing the tree beside it with equal ceremony. "You are completely correct," Adaeze said, with total sincerity. Yuna studied Adaeze's jaw. "Does it still hurt?" "A little." "I will draw another one," Yuna decided, pulling a fresh sheet of paper toward her. Adaeze watched the small hands moving the crayon steadily across the page. Without thinking, her fingers found the bracelet at her wrist and closed around it, the small unconscious habit of a hand that always knew where it was, always needed to confirm it was still there. She released it and looked back at Yuna's drawing. "This is us at the market," Yuna said, holding it up. "Can we go on Saturday?" "Maybe we can ask your appa," Adaeze said. "Maybe is yes if I ask the correct number of times," Yuna said, with the thoughtful skepticism of a child who had kept careful empirical records on this subject. "Let us try once first," Adaeze said. "Very nicely." Yuna accepted this and returned to her drawing. Kwon-soo was in the forecourt the next morning at exactly 7. Broad across the shoulders. Mid-40s. The watchful eyes of someone who had spent a career observing the world without the world observing him back. He nodded once when Adaeze came out, opened the rear door of the car, and said nothing further. She appreciated the total absence of conversation. That evening, Marcus was outside her building when Kwon-soo pulled up. He was leaning against the wall by the entrance, arms folded, wearing the expression she recognized, the reasonable one. The measured one. The one that said he was the patient party, the understanding party, the one who only wanted to talk. The expression that Adaeze knew always came before the other one. The way flat sky came before rain. Kwon-soo parked at a deliberate angle. He stepped out first. He placed himself between Adaeze and the building entrance with the smooth economy of someone who had done this before and found it entirely unremarkable. He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked from Kwon-soo to Adaeze, who had stepped out with her key already in her hand. "I only want to talk," Marcus said. "Not tonight," Adaeze said. "Adaeze, not tonight," Kwon-soo said. Marcus looked Kwon-soo over with the measuring consideration of a man running a cost-benefit calculation on a physical obstacle. Whatever he read in Kwon-soo's particular brand of stillness resolved the calculation efficiently. "Fine," Marcus said, looking at Adaeze. "Tomorrow." "You will not come here tomorrow," Kwon-soo said. "Or the day after." "And who are you exactly?" Marcus asked. "Someone who will be here every day," Kwon-soo said. Marcus stood with his jaw tight for a long moment. Then he pushed off the wall and walked away and turned the corner at the end of the street and was gone. Adaeze released the breath that had been sitting in her chest since Kwon-soo had stopped the car. "Go inside," Kwon-soo said. "Lock the top bolt." She went inside and locked both bolts and sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet and looked at the wall. She unclasped the bracelet and set it on the nightstand the way she did every night, carefully, so the charm lay flat. The gold caught the light from the window and held it. She had worn that bracelet every single day for 9 years. Through 2 surgeries and 11 months of recovery in a private clinic in Nairobi, through the construction of an entirely new person, Adaeze Obi, assembled document by document, reference by reference, with the help of 3 people who had asked her nothing beyond what they needed to know to help her disappear properly. The bracelet had been in her hand when she woke up in that hospital. Her fingers wrapped around the chain while everything else was still in bandages. And it had been, in those first terrible and disorienting days, the one thing that confirmed she was still underneath all the damage, the same person she had been before. She lay back and looked at the ceiling for a long time before sleep arrived. 3 weeks into the routine, on a Wednesday evening, Adaeze was collecting Yuna's crayons from the low table when Minjae came out of his study. He stopped in the middle of the room. "Sit for a moment," he said. She sat at one end of the sofa. He sat in the chair across from her, not close, not crowding, the precise and considered distance of a man who understood that proximity had to be earned in small degrees. He set his glass on the table between them and looked at her directly. "Your family," he said. "Are they in Seoul?" "Lagos," she said. "My mother and my 2 brothers." He absorbed this. "Are you close to them?" "We speak when we can." She paused. "The time difference makes it difficult." He considered this for a moment, then asked, "Do you have people here? Friends?" She thought about it honestly. "There was a woman I worked with at my previous position. We fell out of contact." She looked at her hands. "I have been fairly alone since I arrived." He looked at her. He did not offer sympathy. He did not move quickly to fill the silence with reassurance. He simply took the information in and filed it somewhere precise. "Kwon-soo is available to you during the day," he said. "Not only for the drive. If you need to go anywhere. If anything happens," she looked up. "I am not in danger," she said. "He is not going to, he will," Minjae said. "Men like that always come back. When he does, Kwon-soo will be close." She held his gaze and found no argument available that was also honest, because he was right and she knew he was right, and arguing against something true was a habit she was working to break. "Okay," she said. He reached for his glass and she saw the thin pale scar along his right forearm. Old. Barely there. Catching the lamp for a moment before his sleeve settled back. He did not adjust the sleeve. He did not conceal it. "The market on Saturday," he said. "The 3 of us. Yuna has been asking." "She mentioned it to me," Adaeze said. "She mentioned it to me 5 times today," he said. "Using a different approach each time." He looked at his glass. She is methodical. Adaeze pressed her lips together. He saw it. He looked back at his glass and said nothing, but something at the corner of his mouth shifted by the smallest degree. She picked up her jacket and walked to the elevator. At the door she turned, because she felt his eyes on her back, and she was right. He was standing in the middle of the room with both hands in his pockets, looking at her with the expression she had begun to notice him wearing sometimes when he thought she was not looking. Something caught between recognition and confusion. The look of a man standing in front of a door he cannot account for the existence of. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed between them. She was washing fruit the following Thursday morning when Minjae came into the kitchen. He moved to the coffee machine on the opposite side of the counter. Ordinary morning. He did this every day at this time. But this morning he did not take his cup directly to his study. He stood at the counter and looked out the kitchen window at the city below, and Adaeze continued with the fruit, and the kitchen held both of them in the comfortable quiet of the morning. Then he said, without turning, "Yuna asked me something last night." Adaeze's hands continued moving. What was she asking? About your bracelet, he said. She wanted to know why you wear it every day. Adaeze's hands slowed by half a second. She kept her eyes on what she was doing. What did you tell her? That some things are important enough to keep close, he said. He turned then. He leaned back against the counter with his coffee in both hands and looked at her across the kitchen. His eyes went to the bracelet at her wrist, directly, openly, without the performance of looking at something else. What is the charm? He asked. Adaeze looked down at it briefly. A bird, she said. I had it made a long time ago. In Nairobi. Which part of Nairobi? He asked. She looked up at him. His face was composed and entirely still and gave away nothing. Near the old town, she said. A market near there. I do not remember the exact name. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once and took his coffee and walked to his study. The door closed. Adaeze stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the closed door for a long time. Then she looked down at the bracelet. Then she looked back at the door. The Saturday market was crowded. Yuna walked between them with one hand in Adaeze and the other in Minjae's with the particular satisfied authority of a small child who has successfully arranged the world to her exact preference. She stopped at every stall that interested her with total confidence that the two adults flanking her would stop also. They did. At the dried fruit stall, Yuna spent 4 minutes deciding between 2 identical bags of mango before selecting the first one she had picked up. Minjae watched this process from start to finish without expression. Adaeze watched him watching it. At the flower stall near the far end, Yuna selected a bunch of yellow flowers with decisive speed and presented them to Adaeze. These ones, she said. For your face. Because yellow is for getting better. Adaeze took the flowers. Thank you, my love. Yuna nodded seriously and turned to her father. You should get some too. I do not need flowers, Minjae said. Everyone needs flowers, Yuna said, with the serene patience of someone correcting a small and forgivable error of judgment. He looked down at her. Something in his face softened completely. He purchased the flowers. On the walk back to the car, Yuna reached up and took both their hands at the same time and pulled forward, leaning into the walk, and Minjae looked across the top of his daughter's head at Adaeze. She was looking down at Yuna, her flowers in the crook of her arm, the bracelet catching the pale autumn light. He looked at her for one moment that lasted longer than it needed to. Then Yuna said, faster, and pulled them both forward and the moment ended. 4 months in, on a quiet Sunday, Minjae found Adaeze in the living room after Yuna had gone to bed. She was sitting at the low table looking at the bracelet in her palm, unclasped, lying flat in her hand, the small bird charm facing up. She had not heard him. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he walked in and sat in the chair across from her. She looked up. She did not close her hand. He looked at the bracelet and then at her face. You have been here for 4 months, he said. Yes, she said. I know who you are, he said. The room went completely still. She looked at him. His expression was the same as it always was, composed, direct, giving nothing away and withholding nothing. Not the name you are using, he said. The one before it. Adaeze did not speak. She held his gaze. I recognized you at 3 weeks, he said. Not your face. Your face has changed. The way you move. The way you enter a room and always know where the exits are. The way your hand finds that bracelet every time something frightens you and you do not want to show it. He looked at the charm in her palm. There is a bird exactly like that one on a photograph that was taken 12 years ago. I have looked at that photograph every year for 9 years. The silence in the room was total. Nkechi, he said. Her name, her real name, spoken in his voice, returned to her after 9 years of no one saying it, sat in the air between them like something that had been waiting in a locked room for a very long time. Her throat closed. She pressed her lips together. She kept her chin level. How long have you known, she asked. That you were here? 4 months. He leaned forward and rested his forearms on his knees. That you were alive? He looked at her. I have hoped it for 9 years. I stopped believing it approximately 4 of those years ago. She looked down at the bracelet in her hand. I was not able to come back, she said. I know, he said. I needed to become someone else entirely first, she said. I know, he said. By the time I had done that, I know, he said again, quiet, not cutting her off, just confirming that he did not need the map. He had already drawn it himself. I read everything, he said. When it became clear what Madame Seo had arranged. I found as much as there was to find. I knew what was done to you. I knew why you could not surface. He was silent for a moment. I knew you were right to disappear. She looked at him. You should have been in that car, she said. The night it happened. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. I know that. I waited, I know, he said. I have known for 9 years exactly how long you waited and what it cost you that I was not there. I will not minimize it and I will not ask you to. She looked down at the bracelet again. The bird charm. She had held it in a hospital room and told herself it was proof she still existed. She had held it through 14 months of surgeries and learning to walk without a limp and building a name and a life and a person from nothing. She had carried it across 3 countries to a city in South Korea where she had taken a job through a placement agency without knowing, without any way of knowing, whose apartment she was walking into. Yuna, she said. Yes, he said. She was 2 when her mother left. She has no memory of that. She is entirely herself. He looked at Adaeze steadily. She chose you in the first 10 minutes. That is not nothing. Adaeze was quiet for a long moment. I need time, she said. I have been waiting 9 years, he said. I have time. They did not rush it. He did not ask more of her than she was ready to give and she did not give less than she actually felt, and the distance between them closed the way distance closes when 2 people stop pretending it should close faster than it does, gradually, honestly, without performance. By midwinter, she stayed later in the evenings. By spring, she was not staying late, she was simply still there. Yuna noticed none of this as a change because to Yuna it had always been exactly what it was. On a Tuesday in late spring, Minjae came into the living room after dinner and sat across from her. Yuna had been in bed for 40 minutes. The apartment was quiet. He set a small black box on the low table between them. He did not touch it further. He looked at her and she looked at the box and then at him. I had a ring made once before, he said. I lost it the night I lost you. I had this one made 7 weeks ago. He looked at her directly with no management in his face at all. I am not going to reconstruct what I planned to say 12 years ago. I am not that person anymore. You are not that person anymore. But I am the same person who chose you then, And I am choosing you now with full knowledge of what that choosing has cost and what it will continue to cost, and no interest whatsoever in choosing differently. She opened the box. The ring was plain and exact. On the inner band was engraved the same small bird as the charm on her bracelet. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at him. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. He took the ring from the box and placed it on her hand, and she looked down at it and he looked at her looking at it, and the lamp made its warm and ordinary circle around both of them. Appa, water. Minjae looked at Adaeze. She pressed her lips together, very hard. He stood and walked down the hallway, and she heard his quiet voice and Yuna's quieter voice, and then the hush again. She sat at the low table with the ring on her finger and listened to the apartment breathe around her. She looked at the ring. She held the bracelet. She had carried this bracelet through everything. She understood now what it had always been carrying her toward. They were married on a Saturday in early spring. 28 people in a private garden outside the city. The people who knew the full story. Not the version for the household or the version for public record, but the complete version, with all of its damage and all of its distance and the remarkable, improbable stubbornness of two people who had refused across 9 years and 3 continents to stop being real to each other. Yuna wore a white dress with a yellow sash and was in charge of the petals and took this responsibility with the total seriousness of someone born for exactly this work. She paused twice during the walk to redistribute her coverage where she judged it uneven. Nkechi, her real name given back to her, finally, in a place where it was safe, walked down the garden path in the spring light with the bracelet at her wrist. Minjae stood at the end of the path with his hands at his sides and nothing managed in his face. No distance. No architecture. Just the face of a man watching a woman walk toward him who had survived everything the world had placed between them and had come back. She reached him. She looked up at him. Nkechi, she said. Just for him. Minjae, he said. Just for her, her name and his voice given back to her with everything it had ever held. They said their words. Every single word was true. Yuna, standing nearby with her empty basket, initiated a whispered and apparently critical conversation with the small son of one of the guests regarding the superior quality of her dress. Minjae heard it and held his face together by visible effort. Nkechi fixed her gaze at the middle distance with the focused expression of a woman who has made a decision and intends to keep it. 16 months later, Yuna sat cross-legged on the living room floor and studied the face of her new sibling with the careful concentration of a senior researcher encountering a new and unproven data set. The baby was 12 days old. He had dark hair and the expression of someone who found the premises below his expectations. He was in the padded seat on the coffee table and Yuna was 8 inches from his face. He does not do very much, she observed. He will, Nkechi said from the sofa, her feet tucked under her, her tea on the armrest, watching her daughter examine her son with the expression of a woman who is exactly where she is meant to be. When? Yuna asked. A few months, Minjae said from the armchair. He was watching both his children and his wife. The expression on his face was the one that only this room ever produced in him. Completely unmanaged. Nothing held back. Every year of what had been endured to arrive here was visible in it, and every ordinary day of what they had built since, and the full settled knowledge of a man who knows exactly what he has and exactly what it cost him, and does not look away from either of those truths. Nkechi looked at him from the sofa. He looked back at her. I have been thinking about his name, Yuna said. We gave him a name, Minjae said. I have a better idea, Yuna said. What is it? Nkechi asked. Yuna considered carefully. I will tell you tomorrow, she said. When I have finished thinking. Minjae looked at Nkechi. Nkechi looked at Minjae. They said nothing, because they had been her parents long enough to understand the terrain of this particular conversation and precisely where it led. Later, after Yuna was asleep and the baby was sleeping and the apartment had settled into its night quiet, Nkechi started laughing, sitting on the sofa, quietly at first and then fully, her head tilting back. Minjae sat beside her and watched her laugh, and his face did the thing it only ever did in this room, the complete and unguarded thing. And then he pulled her close. She leaned into him with her shoulder against his chest and her laughter softening into something warm and even. And he rested his cheek against the top of her head, and they sat like that while Seoul moved outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, lit up in the dark, the Han River visible in the distance where it had always been. The bracelet was on the nightstand in the next room. Catchy. 9 years. 2 names. 2 surgeries. 1 child who had reached for both their hands at the same time at a market stall on a mild autumn morning and simply pulled them forward. It had always been pointing here. Every single piece of it had always been pointing exactly here. And that is where we leave them. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. I need to ask you a few things because your thoughts matter deeply to this channel. Was Madame Sio's consequence enough? She lost everything she built and never faced a single day in a courtroom. Does that sit right with you, or did Minjae go too far, or not far enough? What about Marcus? When Minjae sat across from him in that glass-walled office and informed him, in the same quiet voice, that he had purchased the company at 7 that morning, that Marcus's access had been revoked at midnight, and that his residency documentation had encountered a complication, was that the right answer? Or was it too much? And which moment landed the hardest for you? The pavement when he stepped out of the car and said 9 words and Marcus walked away? The first aid kit on the side panel? The market when Yuna put both their hands together and pulled? The kitchen when he said her real name and she could not speak? The living room with the ring and Yuna calling for water from down the hallway? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. If this story moved you, please like it and share it with someone who loves a story that earns every moment it gives you. Subscribe if you have not already, there is more coming and you do not want to miss what is next. My name is Jasmine. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.